Hello, it's Su-Lynn here, and today we're going to look at the multiplane. We're going to look at how to set that up and how to place the layers in Z-Space, also how to make those layers or the drawings into 3D, so to enable 3D and 3D paths. To begin with, I'm just going to show you the final scene. We can start to see as the camera moves that beautiful multiplane or parallax view. We can also see some of the objects such as the bird and the little fairy moves within that space and weaves in and out of the Z space, creating that realism or the 2.5D look that we're trying to achieve. To begin with, let's look at how we can enable 3D. So we're going to go to the first exercise. For our first exercise, we're going to create a box. So we can see here the drawings have had 3D enabled. We can also see across on our node view to the right side of the screen some of the drawings that we will need to create this box. You can see as well attached to each drawing there's a peg, so there's also a peg layer. And just to remind you that we always animate on the peg layer and not on the drawings. So we have the back, which is, if we look in the drawing view, created using a preset of a rectangle. We can go ahead and look at our colors and choose a color that you would like. I've chosen a red. You do that by just double clicking. We go to the multi-wheel, which is the best options. But also added to that, what I'm going to do is look at creating my other layers just from this one single drawing. What we can do now is go back to the camera, go to my timeline view, and we're just going to right click, go up to duplicate selected layers. So now we have two drawings. One is a duplicate of the other over here in the node view. And one thing just to remind you is to always make sure that your node view is really tidy. So let's rename this duplicate. Let's go to top. What we are going to do with the top is to change the color and put a gradient in. So I have a gradient prepared. I'm going to choose this option here, use the paint, and just drop that in. And now we have the top of the box. Let's now go ahead and duplicate again. Repeat that as well for the side. Let's go with left side. Let's adjust those. And as you can see, the ease in which I just organize my node view is just to click and drag and then move them all along. And let's just now go ahead and duplicate that as well. And so we're just going to have the right side. Now we're done. Once we have our drawings, we can go ahead and have a look at any of those drawings by going into the drawing tab. You can also open up your actual nodes to see what they look like as well, just to see what's inside. There's another way as well, is to select the layer and then hit O on your keyboard, and it takes you to the layer in the timeline. And you can solo key as well, just to see what's in that layer. But don't forget to take that off. Okay, so let's now add the pegs. So select all, Shift Command P. And once again, let's just make sure that's nice and tidy. Let's take the top and let's go to the camera view. On the top peg, let's now place our rotation point over here. Remember not to drag on the arrow, which I know sometimes feels logical and is tempting, but what will happen is you will alter the actual position, which is not what you want. So just Command Z. Make sure you move it on the actual rotation point in the center. We're going to flip that on an x-axis. Let's give that a go. Let's move that to the top. You can see as well there's a gradient, so I might have to adjust that so the gradient makes sense, but we'll do that in the next round. And then now let's put the rotation point for the bottom, and let's take that to the bottom. Let's now go to the left side. We're going to flip on the y-axis. I'm going to put it at the bottom corner on my left-hand side because I kind of want it to be flipped from that angle or from that side. Okay, so with the right side, let's go ahead and do that for the opposite side. And then for the back, I'm happy with it just where it is. So let's now do the fun part. Let's enable 3D. One thing that you may want when you enable 3D is to look at it from the perspective view. Now, if you don't have that already in your tabs, hit the plus sign, go down to perspective over here. Let's start with the top. Let's open the properties and make sure we enable 3D. Check that box. With this selected, with the peg selected, And don't forget, you can go to properties and enable peg selection mode. We make sure that also we have these coordinates up, which can be found in Windows toolbars. Make sure coordinate is checked. Once that is done, you'll get this option here. Select on the peg for the top of the box, put in minus 90 degrees. Go to our perspective view, holding down Option and Command, we can start to rotate, and let's just zoom in using our keys. We can start to see how that's looking. There's a slight adjustment that needs to be made to make that a little bit more perfect. We can go to that peg, choose this tool here, the translate tool. One thing to keep in mind is that you always move it on the locked arrows. If you move it from the center point, it sort of moves freely, and you don't want that. You kind of want accuracy here. So I'm going to use the blue arrow just to nudge that up. And let's go to the bottom. And again, we can go back to the camera view for this. And we're going to do the same thing. We make sure that Enable 3D is checked. Go up to the X-axis. And this time it's 90, so plus 90. Go ahead and have a look at that in the perspective view. Let's again make those little adjustments. Let's go to the left side. This time we know the left side of the box. We want to rotate on the Y-axis this time. So we're going to repeat some of the process. We're going to open up the property, check Enable 3D, select the peg, but go to the Y-axis option. Because I want to flip to the left side of my box, I'm going to put a minus 90, and we can see that's now snapped in. Needs a little bit of adjustment. I'm going to select it and again go to my translate tool. It's over here. Nudge that a little bit. Okay, so we can see some of the gradients aren't quite making sense. We can actually go ahead and adjust that. On the left-hand side, select the drawing, go to the drawing. With the drawing selected right now, go to the option for Edit Gradient Texture. We can see that it can be rotated. Rotate it again. Let's have a look at it in the perspective view. That makes more sense now. So the dark tone is coming from the inside, going to a lighter tone. Let's go to the right side. Again, open that up, check Enable 3D, and this time we want the same flip on the Y-axis, but it's plus 90. I'm going to rotate it a little bit. Again, just a reminder, Option Command to bring up that rotation mode. Let's go to the Translate tool. One thing we do still need to do is to adjust the top and the bottom. I'm going to select the drawing this time. Go to my drawing, to the Edit Gradient. And if I look in the perspective view, that kind of makes sense as well. The gradients on the inside. Do the same thing for the bottom. If we go to perspective view, we can start to see we've built our box. There we go. So one thing to show off the 3Dness of this box is to add a camera. So we can do that quite simply by going to add the camera here. And when you add a camera, one thing you have to remember to do is to add a peg. So the peg is what you animate on. We can make this camera into Enable 3D, and we can also make it follow a 3D path as well. So we're going to do both of those. So with the camera peg selected, let's go ahead and put in a starting point. So this is where it will begin. And then we can go to, say, frame 60, which is the default for the length or the time. And we can just play around with how that may look by just moving it on the Y-axis. We can look at the top view for Z space, as well as positioning as left and right. So you can see when you don't use the actual restriction, which is on the line, it does become skewed. But if you want it to be locked off, you have to move it on the line itself. So we have the starting position and we have the end position. That's when you add your motion frames. So this is to make sure that you have in-betweens. The solid arrow shows that it's set. And now let's go ahead and play it. Let's go back to our node view so we can see the setup. So that's it for this stage of how you create 3D layers.